Welcome to the Your Music Industry Podcast.
The podcast that gives you a direct route into the music industry's greatest minds. Your Music Industry is proudly brought to you by the Liverpool Audio Network with your host, Daniel Fisher-Jones.
Welcome to episode number 12 of the Your Music Industry Podcast. How's your week been? Have you been working in the studio or taking steps towards achieving your goals? Make sure to let me know. Thank you for tuning in to this episode. As a lover of this guest's philosophy, his creative works, and also the label he is signed to, it was an absolute pleasure to sit down and talk about his story and thoughts on the music industry on a typical wet British Tuesday afternoon a few weeks back. On Friday, our guest released his debut solo album on no other than Erase Tapes. But before I introduce today's guest, how would you fancy winning a place on an online mixing course? As a thank you to you for being a part of the Your Music Industry story and listening to the podcast, we've teamed up with Make Your Transition to give away a place on their brand new online mixing course. I'm a big fan of the Make Your Transition courses, ranging from Finish More Music to Market Your Music. They're insanely valuable and full of insightful content. If you fancy a chance in winning the mixing course, head over to yourmusicindustry.com/giveaway to sign up. We'll be announcing the winner next week on episode 13 of Your Music Industry, so make sure you don't miss out on this opportunity. It's time to introduce you to this episode's guest. I first came into contact with our guest's work a few years back during a collaboration with electronic virtuoso Luke Abbott. Through beginning his journey in Australia to moving to Liverpool and founding Immix Ensemble, a new musical ensemble focused on collaborations with Liverpool's most innovative music voices, to as of Friday releasing his debut solo album, Lines of Sight on Erase Tapes. It's a pleasure to welcome you to Liverpool-based composer who is pushing boundaries and sparking a wealth of innovation in our music community. Composer and saxophonist Daniel Thorne. Welcome, Daniel, to the Your Music Industry Podcast. Okay. There's a lot to cover in this episode, and I'm really excited to cover the world of Immix Ensemble, Daniel Thorne, and the world of Erase Tapes and the future. So welcome.
Thank you. Thanks so much.
How are you doing?
I'm very well, thank you. Yeah, that's good. Looking forward to this.
Perfect. So out now is Lines of Sight. Before we touch on the world of the new debut solo album, could you talk us through your journey as an artist and as a composer?
Okay, so I'm originally from Perth, Western Australia, and I got interested in music when I was in my teens. I think that was when when it started to feel like a kind of part of my personality. I think it was around that age. I was playing in bands with friends, and I got through high school, and sort of up until pretty close to the end of it, I had my sights set on being a pilot. And then I realized that it was going to cost a crazy amount of money to do it, and decided I'll just be a musician instead. That's a great way to make some money. But no, so I decided I wanted to try and get into university in music. I was really lucky in that, so in Perth, there's the West Australian Academy of Performing Arts, and the jazz course there in particular was, and probably still is, I don't know, it's been a little while, but like the sort of top course in the country for that sort of thing. Some very, very accomplished musicians had gone through there and were sort of teaching there as staff. So I kind of lucked out in that regard, but my kind of local university was great, and I sort of blagged my way through an audition because I couldn't read music or anything. And I got into a kind of a jazz course, I think just off the back of being all right with improvising, and my ears were pretty good. So that was, I'd say, going to uni is when I kind of realized just how vast the pool of music is, and just what the kind of potential to achieve within that was. And I had a really good group of fellow students around me as well. We all kind of lifted each other up together, I think. Some great teachers. I had in particular some composition teachers who were really, really good about encouraging us to write music, but also to check out as much different music as we could. So, and importantly as well, I got to have that music played and performed, and got to perform other people's music as well, which was a huge thing, really, because if there's nothing like being sat in the middle of someone's music to kind of get to know it and try and understand what's going on with it. In my kind of final year at uni, I did a big, I had to do a big sort of research project, like a big old 12,000 word dissertation and a 40-minute recital and everything on one idea. And I chose to look at a classical composer called Arvo Pärt, and kind of he's got a very unique musical language and approach, and so I thought I'd try and take that along to a jazz orchestra and write some music in that world using sort of this language. And that was when I kind of realized that for me, like, the projects that I found really interesting and stimulating were ones that kind of brought different styles of music together and tried to kind of synthesize some kind of hybrid between the two. And that kind of philosophy's sort of been consistent right the way through my kind of musical journey, for want of a better word, since then. Those were the early days, I think. I've probably glossed over a lot, but there's probably a lot of like unexciting jazz specific stuff in there. I kind of I got out of university, and I think, like a lot of people, when you come out of a music course, it's just a little bit like, well, like, what do I do? And also a degree as well of like, we worked very hard at what we'd done, and felt we were doing it to quite a good standard and all that. So I think a lot of, not just myself, but like some of my friends as well, I think we all sort of felt a bit like that kind of enthusiastic entitlement, let's call it, for just like, we're amazing and we're young, give us stuff, and then no one was giving us stuff. But Perth was an interesting place because particularly in the jazz scene, like the standard of musicians is insanely good in a way that you really wouldn't expect. Like very, very high caliber musicians coming through, but Perth as a city didn't have a whole lot of opportunities to play. And so we kind of found as well that, you come out of university and then all of a sudden you're competing for gigs with your lecturers, and then the like however many years of other graduates there are who are still kicking around the city. And I sort of realized off the back of that like it would probably be a good thing to maybe try going somewhere else. And I was encouraged to do that by my one of my teachers as well. She was very adamant that, like, go away, see somewhere else, learn some different things, and if you want to come back, you can always come back, sort of thing. And it just kind of so happened that at the time I'd met my now fiance, and she was planning on coming to the UK. I had dual citizenship, even though I'd never set foot in the country. I could. We made a plan and came to Liverpool because that's where her dad was, and figured it would be a good place to kind of start out. And 9 years later, I'm still starting out in Liverpool. That's sort of how I got here.
That's really interesting, that journey to go from one side of the world to the other, and for your core thing to still be music. That's fantastic. As I know myself, with currently studying in university, the moment you leave university and graduate, it's what you do. So I can understand that stress, the unknown.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, like, I think studying at university is a great thing to do for, I don't think it's something that people should feel they need to do, but like, you know, there are some really great things about learning in that kind of intensive way. And certainly for me, to be able to go from someone who didn't know anything about music theory and had such a kind of limited grasp on that side of things to someone who came out the other side of it able to compose and notate music for classical ensembles and jazz ensembles and things like that, to go through that kind of intense learning in a concentrated way in a relatively short amount of time is like really awesome. It's a really great thing to be able to do. But yeah, then you come off the back of it, it's just like, cool. What now? Without the sort of structures in place and all of that, you have to be responsible for your own deadlines, your own everything. Like, and it took me a while to work that out. I think because I was playing in a few groups, sort of outside of university that were run by, other students and things, some people who'd graduated just before I'd started. And, I'd kind of been lucky in that because they were all really proactive in doing stuff and they were asking me to play, I was getting to play and be involved in projects without really having to do anything. I was just kind of like, yeah, great. Like, you know, sort of get a phone call, get a text or whatever. And like, I wasn't, you know, I still wanted to be working a lot more than I was, but I was also still very stimulated by the stuff that I was doing. And so that was a big difference for me when it came to Liverpool, just being away from those networks and the music scene having a different landscape to the one in Perth as well. I realized just how many kind of crutches I had in that scene. And, the first 3 or so years that I was here, I really wasn't doing a lot of music, because I didn't really know how to navigate the scene here. And there is a jazz scene, but there wasn't as much going on as I was used to. And, it was ages before I realized what was going on in the kind of like experimental scenes here and groups like X Easter Island Head and all of that. When I've heard them for the first time, it's just like, where is it? Like, why haven't I seen this before? I've been waiting 3 years to find this sort of thing here. And like, it's hard when you move somewhere and you don't have your networks. You have to be a lot more self-sufficient, and I'm still not great at that. Like, I still kind of have to force it a little bit. But that was definitely one of the driving factors behind starting Immix as well, was to meet some players and people who are interested in playing lots of different types of music, and also kind of selfishly to have someone to write for, because that's the downside of sort of writing acoustic music, is that you need people to play it. Unless you're a very, very gifted performer as well, and you just want to write for your instrument. And I'm neither of those things. So, reliant on other people.
So the story of Immix, it is an interesting one with a lot of different collaborators, ranging from Luke Abbott, Vessel. Could you talk us through the early days up to now? So how you built kind of your own profile personally and through Immix to then find those collaborators, and also how to find the people within the ensemble as well.
So the way Immix started was, so in about 2013, I, in a really, really random way, I was working in a cafe and saw someone putting music into Sibelius and struck up a conversation, and then sort of in a very roundabout way got introduced to a guy called Ian Brownbill, who was then the director at Metal in Liverpool. It's an arts organisation at Edge Hill Station. A little while after that, Ian got in touch to say that they were running a composers lab. Would I want to attend? And so it's sort of like a week-long set of sessions and workshops and things. And that was really, really exciting. And off the back of that, the guys at Metal offered me the first of what became their time and space residencies. And the idea behind this residency, or that I wanted to do, was basically to use it as an excuse to start an ensemble, because I figured that there was a gap locally for something that was something that seemed really obvious to me, was that, like, you know, the music scene in Liverpool is, you know, it's varied. There are some, like, people making different types of music, and there are people doing that very well. And at the same time, you had the Philharmonic Orchestra, who are a great orchestra and had some phenomenal players in there as well. And I just sort of, to me, it seemed obvious that there should be some kind of conversation going between those parts of the musical community. It didn't seem to be happening. So I was like, all right, this is my grand idea. I'm going to start an ensemble that's going to try and facilitate those conversations. And so Metal helped me with an Arts Council application to get some funding for it, and also helped me with the sort of start to build the network with players, because that was the other thing, is I just really... I didn't know a lot of people, and I really wanted to make sure that I got the right people for that project. Because I've had experiences before where I've been playing in sort of ensembles that have been paired with songwriters or pop acts or things like that. And, you know, like, some people are great and super into it, but you do occasionally get musicians who can be a bit standoffish, and there's nothing worse than when, like, you know, okay, just because someone didn't go to music school and doesn't know what the bar number is or doesn't know that sort of thing, like, there's no reason to kind of treat them like an idiot or anything like that. You know, those problems always seem to come down to communication, and I just wanted to have a group of people who were really good at their instruments and could kind of handle anything that was thrown at them, but were just as comfortable being given some really complicated, abstract, sort of new complexity style notation, or being told by a dancer to kind of, like, play the sound of a rainbow or something. Like, you know, some people who were pretty much up for any kind of musical challenge. And again, so Ian at Metal, he knew a few people in the Phil, and so I had some conversations, and, you know, sort of quite often one conversation would lead to, oh, you should try so-and-so, and then if so-and-so couldn't do it, then they'd suggest someone else. And it kind of came out quite organically out of that. But, and it's, since then, it's the membership is pretty much stabilized. They've, you know, everyone's busy working kind of freelance and all that, so not everyone can do every gig, but we've got a good pool of depth as well. And, like, yeah, it's nice. It feels like the kind of people get what it's about now, and the guys playing in it are really a big part of, I think, what makes it successful, is because they're just up for anything and they're so friendly, and it's super cool. So I think the first season that we put on with that first Arts Council application, basically I just kind of, I'd had a bit of a look at some people who I knew in the scene, and it was sort of using my networks of just people I'd encountered who I thought were doing interesting things, and I thought, hey, like, wouldn't it be cool if this happened? I really like the idea as well of trying to collaborate in as many different ways as possible. So not just people collaborating with the ensemble, but also bringing in, like, people from different musical disciplines on the same concert and having them collaborate in some way as well. It was, I mean, for me, that kind of model, I think, is still, projects that have that kind of sort of full-on level of collaboration is still, for me, the ones that really excite me. Because particularly when, like, you know, if you've got people who don't know each other, or, you know, maybe know each other but haven't had a chance to work together before and have wanted to, or something, like, it feels like it kind of sows the seeds for something that will ideally kind of go beyond that one-off concert. And
Are you enjoying this episode of Your Music Industry? Make sure to let me know what you think with hashtag Your Music Industry or at Liverpool Audio. If you make music and struggle with mixing your tracks, or want to gain even more knowledge on the subject, don't miss out on our giveaway of Make Your Transitions new online course. If you want to be within the chance of winning, head over to yourmusicindustry.com/giveaway to enter. Back over to the conversation with Daniel Thorne. So in March 2016, the Immix and Vessel release called Transitions released on Erased Tapes. Could you talk us through that journey and how that came into fruition, really?
So the part of that first series of shows that we did included the kind of premiere of Transition, which we did as part of the Open Circuit Festival out of Liverpool Uni in 2014. Vessel, aka Seb, because it seems weird just saying Vessel instead of Seb. So Seb and I had sort of collaborated largely over email on that one, just sort of throwing some ideas back and forth, but we didn't know each other beforehand. So the way that had worked was I'd started talking with a promoter and general kind of arts guru around Liverpool, Andrew Ellis, and he'd helped me a little bit with my Arts Council application that year and had been kind of sort of loosely guiding things. And then with this one, this was originally going to be a kind of it was going to be joint promoted by him and by the university and everything. And we had a different collaborator lined up, and they had to pull out of it. And so we put out a call, or I say we, so Andrew, who has the network, put out a call, and Seb got back in touch, and I wasn't aware of his music before that, and took one listen. I was just like, oh my God, I'd love to do something with him. And we got super lucky in that I think compositionally we were coming from very similar places. Particularly given that we were working over email and just sending things back and forth, and not just working over email as well, he would send these soundscapes that sound amazing because that's his medium, and then I'd have to send over these general MIDI kind of mock-ups of the instrumental parts, and just be like, it'll sound a lot better than this with real instruments. But we both kind of had similar ideas of what we wanted to achieve, and I think we've got similar philosophies around music making as well, which just made it very easy. The concert kind of came together and went pretty well. Parallel to that, I'd also I'd applied for the Merseyside Arts Foundation's sort of scheme, and part of that came with some recording time. So I'd originally, very optimistically, when I applied for it, I was like, yeah, let's do an archive of all the Immix recordings, and realized that was incredibly unrealistic, but thought it'd be a good opportunity to record the music with Seb, purely just because, purely selfishly, was because I thought it was, it's something that I'd written or had been involved in writing, and I wanted to have a good document of it. It wasn't like, this is the one that's going to be commercially successful or anything like that. I didn't have any kind of thought about that. So we recorded it and had it mixed and everything. And then we sort of, by that point, Andrew had kind of come into Immix in more of a sort of permanent capacity as a sort of general manager. And so he was starting to look at places where we could pitch it to and see if anyone would bite. I was fairly not pessimistic, but I was aware that the music was probably going to be, it was different to the sort of stuff that Vessel was doing before. So I thought it wouldn't be a given that someone who liked Punish Honey would like that record. So I wasn't entirely convinced that a label would take it, and thought we'd probably just self-release it or something like that. But through like one of those crazy coincidences, which it seems the music industry is founded on, Seb's manager was working at Erased Tapes at the time, and Robert from Erased Tapes heard it and liked it enough to get us together for a chat. And I was, they were really enthusiastic about it. And they were already a favorite label of mine. So it was pretty wild to have that kind of, that sort of coincidence happen. Because, it sort of sucks actually, because it kind of, in a way, it confirms that whole thing of like, it's not what you know, it's who you know. And it's like, I just think we were very lucky in having that in, like, because I don't think it's necessarily an easy sell, that music, but they loved it and they wanted to put it out. So super excited and happy about that.
That's great. Yeah. That's really great. I have checked that record out and it is sublime. It's fantastic.
Oh, thanks. Thanks a lot.
So moving forward to today.
Yeah.
Lines of Sight is now out now, also signed to Erased Tapes. So looking at the bio on the website of Lines of Sight, there's a really interesting kind of phrase that I'd like to basically ask you about. So Lines of Sight is the realization of a number of ideas and goals. Could you explain that? Yeah.
Okay. So just after everything happened with Transition, I signed on to the publishing arm at Erased Tapes, and they've been amazing from a kind of development point of view, and they're just the loveliest group of people. I feel incredibly lucky there. And the first conversations that I had with them, I realized that there was a really big gap between the sort of music that I was talking about wanting to be making and what I actually had to show for it. And just that realization of, like, it all kind of made sense to me what I wanted to do, but actually if I had to try and explain it or convey that to someone, it becomes quite convoluted. Yeah. And the easiest way is just to do something and show it and be like, this is what I do, this is what my music is. And so I'd kind of been wanting to do something that was a mix of sort of electronic stuff, but also kind of coming at it in the way that I would write for an acoustic ensemble. But I wanted to sort of steer clear of the kind of classical electroacoustic style of recording where it's, like a room recording and maybe with a little bit of balancing and stuff. Yeah. I wanted to like properly go into studio mode and, make something that sounds like it's written for the studio and with those kinds of things. I also kind of, without sounding like too corporate as well, I wanted to do something that would kind of show that I could do a few different things, like not just write music, but also sort of the production side of things as well. Also just doing something on the cheap. Like it's like my time's pretty cheap for me.
Yeah. So is the record all mixed and produced by yourself?
Yeah.
Wow.
I didn't master it, but all the mixing and recording and everything was me in the spare room at our place. So
that's fantastic. A real bedroom studio.
Yeah. Which I kind of like as well. I'd love to have a nice proper dedicated studio, and I hope that that's something that's in the future for me. But I do think there's something kind of charming about like walking into the room and like, you know, putting some towels away in the cupboard, and it's like, I recorded my album in here, and it's like, and it's out in the world now. It's like, yeah,
it's like that photo Fortet put out a while ago, like, this is where I made the album or something.
Yes, yeah, I saw that. Yeah. It's like, yeah, it's exactly that. Because I think like, it's that whole like electronic music as folk music kind of argument, isn't it? Yeah. It's just like if you have the time, like, you know, you can do so much by yourself. And I mean, like, I didn't use expensive gear for it. I mean, it was literally, I mean, how geeky do you get about gear here?
Get it
cool.
all on the table.
All right, okay. So my setup was, I mean, just a MacBook Pro with like a cheap VGA monitor, like literally VGA monitor that I'd just borrowed off my girlfriend's dad. I just had one of the Audient interfaces, the ID22, because for me it was the best kind of quality conversion and preamps that I could get on a budget. I also picked up a Focusrite ISA 1 secondhand, and other than that, like, I borrowed, what was it? 80-40-33 Audio-Technica mic, and recorded everything on that. My synth is just the humble Novation bass station.
Oh, really? I've got one of them myself.
They're great. They're amazing. Super underrated. I borrowed a Juno for one of the tracks, but it was pretty beat up. And when I demoed the track with it and was really happy with it. And then when I went to actually do it properly, one of the voice cards died. So every third note was just mute. And I was like, okay, so I ended up just kind of like layering just on the bass station. I kind of like the idea that it's literally just one synth on the whole thing. It's like, and then the other star was like a Watkins copycat tape delay that was also really, really beat up and bashed up, but it's got this like crazy one of a kind sort of character. Like it's its own thing because it's just been so neglected, and I love it. It's really, it really has so much character. So I think that's a bit of a tangent, but back to your sort of original question, the goals were basically to have something that sounded like what I thought my music should sound like, and to do as much of it myself as I could.
So it's like a big self-expression.
Yeah, basically, kind of a bit of a like put your money where your mouth is sort of thing, because I like, you know, I don't know. There's a phrase in the Max MSP manual about the intellectual aristocracy, and like the kind of context for it in that manual is that like Max is really, really difficult. If you're learning about Max, you're probably one of these people who thinks that you're like pretty bright and can do stuff, but like, trust me, you should read the manual. And like, he uses that phrase like, you know, you belong to what we call the intellectual aristocracy. And like, I definitely fall victim to that. I think I'm often like, yeah, I can do this and all that, and then sit down to do it and like, oh, I don't know a thing about this. I think that's why it took me so long to actually do something with electronics initially, was because it was just like, I'd be like, yeah, I can do this. I'm going to make some electronic music. And I'd open Ableton Live and then be like, yeah, like I can put some delay and I can like do all of this. I don't know how to make a synth patch. I don't like, you know, all these sort of things. So I had to properly go away and like study these things sort of on my own time. And then the record was a kind of outlet for all of that, everything I'd learned about, sort of production and, audio tech.
So on a compositional note regarding the album, to put it into context for maybe people who haven't heard it yet, which I'd highly recommend, the album will be in the show notes of the episode. If you had to define the sound of the album to maybe a fusion of three or four artists or albums, who would they be, or what would they be?
Okay. Hopefully these names make sense. So I compositionally I'm really drawn to sort of large, sort of glacial, sort of structures and sounds and things. So I think from an acoustic music point of view, a composer like John Luther Adams is has had a very kind of big influence on me. I think his music is just to die for. And the kind of equivalent on the electronic side would probably be someone like Tim Hecker. Yeah. And to kind of throw a third thing in there in terms of the kind of saxophone playing and the kind of quality of saxophone sound on there, people like what they call the kind of West Coast school of sort of saxophone sounds. So guys like Paul Desmond, Lee Konitz, or sort of contemporary players like Hayden Chisholm, they've sort of been big influences in that way. So whether or not all of those names mean something or not, but
any specific pieces of music you'd recommend people checking out? Okay,
so John Luther Adams, there's a great piece. I mean, all of his music's amazing. I'm trying to think what a good kind of entry point would be. In the White Silence is a good one. There's also Become Ocean, which was, I think it won a Grammy and possibly a Pulitzer as well. Fairly recent one that I think, Become Ocean even got Taylor Swift's seal of approval because, I guess it was, that must have been the one that won the Grammy because I think that's how she found out about it. And then she I can't remember the exact story, but she heard it and then donated an obscene sum of money to the orchestra that played it.
Wow.
Yeah. So there you go, guys. The music industry works sometimes. I mean, Tim Hecker, anything, absolutely anything. I mean, I still really find myself drawn back to Rave Death and drop pianos. Those two are great. But and Hayden Chisholm, he's got a lot of music out. There's a set of recordings called the Well-Tempered Shruti Box. And it's pretty wild. So it's just these long improvisations that he did in a concert, and it's literally him solo, just accompanying himself with a shruti box that he just kind of sets up a drone with and lets go, and then just improvises along it. And he kind of moves through all the different combinations of the different kind of tonal centers that you can get out of a shruti box, and improvises over all of them. And it's really, really beautiful music.
I'll definitely have to check that out because it sounds right up my street.
It's amazing. He also, I can't remember the name of the recording. I think it might be called Density. There's one that's it's pretty out there. I think it's 8 alto saxophones, and it's kind of derived from Fibonacci sequences and using quarter tonal harmony and weird tunings, and it sounds like you're on Mars. It's really, really eerie but a very exciting sound world to kind of delve yourself into.
I'm definitely going to check that out straight after this. So moving more on to Erased Tapes, a lot of our past podcast guests, from an electronic point of view, a lot of their labels have been very digital, let's say, very network-based labels, all online. From my perspective, I see Erased Tapes to be very traditional, but also they're very established as well. So I'm interested to learn the process of how the latest album has been released on Erased Tapes, if it has been sat in a studio with Robert or someone from the team going through it and that sort of process.
I mean, I don't have too much experience of other labels, but certainly from what I've gleaned from conversations with other people and all of that, I mean, they're very hands-on, and they're very invested in their artists and the development of their artists, which is unfortunately becoming a rarer and rarer thing in the music industry. But I think it's why they've got such a successful roster. I mean, to be honest, for lines of sight, I kind of drip fed them the music as I was writing it and demoing it, largely through the kind of publishing side of things. Actually, it was just, again, because I didn't really have too much beyond transition. It was like a good quality recording of my music in this kind of realm. I was just kind of giving them a kind of idea of what I was doing, and so if they wanted to try and pitch some demos to someone or whatever, from the kind of publishing and commissioning standpoint. So they were sort of aware, and Robert and Julie, who's in charge of the publishing, would both sort of give feedback here and there with the demos. And then I sort of said that, like, I thought that it would work as an album. I sent over the kind of the finished tracks once I'd gone back and re-recorded everything. And I mean, they definitely, as you know, like, the label has a really, really strong aesthetic, visually, and in terms of, the focus on the kind of physical object and everything. So, I'd kind of go down for a meeting or something, and there'd be a lot of talk about that side of thing, like, a big sort of interest in the artwork and that. I mean, I worked with a Liverpool artist, Paul Rafferty, for the cover art, and I think it's turned out amazing.
Yeah, I love it.
But it was actually Robert who had the idea of printing on the kind of metallic Pantone and things, which just adds a really kind of visceral kind of quality to it. They're definitely involved in various steps. I don't think there wasn't any kind of discussion on, like, track listing or order, but I mean, maybe I was lucky, maybe I got it right, maybe they're happy with it first time around. But it was. They're definitely. It's definitely not a case of just like, oh yeah, okay, go away, finish some music, and like we'll release it or whatever. It's very much like they're involved in, and it's a very positive thing. I think. I definitely feel that, like, a lot of the success of the label probably is rooted in that. And it's not a new concept, the idea of being involved and giving your artists time and supporting them and all of that. And, like, funnily enough, it works. It's like it's a bit sad that it's a kind of remarkable thing.
Yeah, exactly.
But yeah, they're definitely one of the good guys for sure.
So now I'd like to touch upon the world of your own lifestyle and approach to health and well-being in the music industry. As being a performer and a creative, sometimes there's a lot of stresses on not only your body, but your mind. So it'd be interesting to learn how you stay healthy and active and creative day to day.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. So I do yoga every day. I've been doing that for probably about 2-3 years now. That's been a big part, and actually that's a really, really significant part of it. I think I'm not a crazy yogi, like I just do sort of 20-30 minutes every morning or something is usually the first thing. And to be honest, it's usually my my partner who instigates it. But having said that, like I think it's very, very, it's a very good thing mentally and physically. 'Cause it's an interesting one. Like physically, I mean, the saxophone and certainly the way I play it is not hugely physical. Like I know that for people like Colin Stetson with like a giant saxophone and circular breathing and all of that, like that's like a very physical, visceral thing, and like you'd have to be in such good shape to do that. Like that's not really the way that I approach the instrument, so I can be a bit slacker in that regard. But I'm still, it is still a physical thing. I certainly find, at least in terms of being able to kind of keep relaxed and keep calm in performance situations, like, knowing sort of like what your body is doing and having that awareness of like where nervous energy is going and all of that is a very useful thing. And certainly mentally though, like I think it's so important because it's just a minefield. I mean, I'm very lucky in that I've got a great label supporting me, and Andrew, the manager from Immix, is like he's been a really, really helpful person to have as well. I've got a great partner. These are all good, really positive things, and I still find that the music industry can really get me down. Yeah. So I think that says something about just how, I don't want to say that it's incompatible with a lot of things that I think should be kind of central to life. But I mean, there's an expectation that you're always working. There's like, crazy long hours. You're constantly sort of pitting yourself or like putting yourself out there and like wanting people to love you, and like it's a minefield. I'm also, I've been vegan for about a year. That's been really good for me. I don't think it's necessarily for everyone. I do think, like, without going full on into sort of ethics and environmentalism, like, I think that it's definitely the way the world is going. And like, I would definitely encourage people to try it, because I think you'd be surprised how little it makes a difference actually. But, I don't know that necessarily has a direct kind of correlation onto my creative side of things, other than, I guess, healthy body, healthy mind, and all of that.
So I think that leads us great onto the next question, which is our second to last question. Mm-hmm. And I ask this question to everyone on the podcast, and sometimes there's some mind-blowing answers that totally surprise me. So this could be on a local, national, or international scale. What change would you like to see in the music industry over the next 3 to 5 years?
Oh, that's interesting. It's sort of like, it's like being confronted with Santa, and like, you can only ask for one thing. I think that it would be nice if there were a way for artists to, particularly sort of solo and self-releasing artists, to be able to get their music out into the world and find people who are going to help them with that journey easier. Because I think that, like, this whole idea of, the self-releasing artist and all of that as being like something you can do, because as long as you've got an internet connection, you've got a laptop and all of that, you can make your own album and you can put it on iTunes and Spotify, and you can do everything yourself. It's just like, that's great. But not everyone's great at promoting themselves, and not everyone's great at booking shows. And also, it starts eating into the time thing again. It's just like, I mean, most people who are making music aren't doing it for the money. Most people who are making music aren't doing it for the money, and they're, if you've got, say, like a day job or something like that, and maybe you've only got 3 hours a week to kind of devote to your music as a project. If you're having to spend like 2 hours of that emailing booking agents, or trying to book a gig, or trying to get your musicians together, or just finding someone to listen to your record and sit down and have a chat, it would be nice if there was some kind of sort of mechanism or kind of structure for supporting people in that kind of area, particularly people sort of like mid kind of stage of their career, like, you're not a brand new talent, you might have put out an EP or two on your own, but just like, something to kind of bring those people in touch with people who want to kind of help and all of that. Get away from that sort of who kind of being such a key thing in getting your music heard. That's not a terribly concise answer. It's more of a kind of, I don't know, a philosophy, I guess. But hopefully that's somewhat useful.
That's fantastic and very useful. So where can people find you online, Daniel?
Online, I have to confess, I'm not a big social media person.
Okay.
I have a Twitter account. I post to it kind of sporadically. I have a website, and obviously my music sort of, again, the advantage of being on a label and all of that, my music is sort of out through all the usual channels. But yeah, social media is not really my thing. I don't know if you saw actually Nils just stepped away from it. I have to say, I've got a very similar kind of philosophy around that. I think that actually it was moving from the UK, I've moved from Australia to the UK, played a big part in that actually. I just, especially the first few years when I was here and not doing a lot of music, I'd, go online and then see all my friends making music and doing great, exciting things. And I was sort of sat working in a cafe, and it was just like, I just kind of had enough and I kind of dropped off of it then. And, I think it works great for some people. It's sadly a big reality for a lot of people to promote their own music, but I don't know. What it's kind of become, I don't think is a particularly positive thing for a lot of people anyway. But yeah.
So on that note, Lines of Sight is now out now. If you head over to yourmusicindustry.com/012, you can find links to it there, or search Lines of Sight or Daniel Thorne in Spotify or whatever streaming site you use. So thank you, Daniel, for being a guest on Your Music Industry. I've absolutely loved it, and it's been really insightful.
Oh, thanks so much for having me. It's been great. Really enjoyable.
Have a great day.
Thanks.
I'm personally finding it really interesting to hear how there's starting to be a correlation between what our guests would like to see change in the industry. Whether it's Daniel's thoughts on social media which resonate with Mark Lawrence's in episode 8, or Daniel's philosophy on creating an industry that supports grassroots artists, which also links with Kikiri's thoughts in our last guest episode. I'm really excited to see how over the coming months and years our guests' thoughts correlate. But other than that, make sure to check out Daniel's debut solo album, released on Erase Tapes on Friday, called Lines of Sight. It is out now, and I would highly recommend it. As you may have noted in this episode, as I certainly did, Daniel mixed the record himself. Do you struggle with mixing yourself, or you're looking to learn more? We are giving away a place on Make Your Transitions Mixing online course. If you'd like to be in a chance with winning the place on the course, head over to yourmusicindustry.com/giveaway. This now marks the end of Your Music Industry episode 12. Thank you for being a part of the first dozen episodes, and I can't wait to give you even more value through the podcast. Your Music Industry returns on Monday with Know-How number 3, Distractions, Your Frenemy. Until then, have a fantastic and productive week.